Good day and welcome back to another DBZ Dokkan Metal video. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Planet Namek Saga stage of the Goku's Family Edition uh, Red Zone. I was going to say Extreme Super Battle Road, but of the Red Zone. Honestly speaking, it is actually really interesting a stage. I actually found it to be quite interesting in terms of difficulty and things. I thought it was quite challenging in its own way. Obviously, you have a couple phases here. So we have Raccoon, first phase. He doesn't do too much. He hits for 1.1 million super, 70 million health. Then we have Jason Berta, who have a 5% evasion chance, are immune to stunning, sealing, etc. They have a bit more health, 90 million, but then obviously they hit for about 1.5. Then we have Captain Ginyu. So Captain Ginyu, I would say definitely a step up, 80 million health. Changes AGL key spheres to physical key spheres, which I guess is irritating because it obviously prevents you from having some control over the field in terms of the orbs, or at least you have less control over the field, stuff like that. Other than that, yeah. Then you move on to Frieza Final Form. Frieza Final Form obviously can lock your characters. He locks one character per turn, guaranteed. This is probably the most irritating ability, and definitely causes most players a lot of problems, or at least irritates a lot of players, because it removes a lot of your player agency, which is like one of the few ways you can kind of control things. So I think that's something that's definitely quite frustrating. And then that moves into the int final form full power Frieza. Well, I guess Frieza full power. The int Frieza full power definitely hits pretty hard, 2.1 million. But it's not the hardest one, not the hardest super in the world nowadays. However, he does perform a critical hit when launching a super attack, which does make that 2.1 hit quite a fair chunk harder. And I think that could pose players quite a bit of problems, at least, functionally speaking. In terms of, like, the overall fights and everything, what I will say for me, like looking at, everything to do with, like, this fight, I will say, things ramp up mainly by the Captain Ginyu stage. Like, I would say that's where things start to really ramp up. They start to get a lot harder. They start to get a lot more difficult. And I think in general, that's where you'll probably find your no item run becomes hard, because before that you could seal, you could stun, you could attack lower, you could do things to mitigate Jason, Berta, and Raccoon, and all that sort of stuff. But then from Captain Ginyu, you don't have anything like that. Immune to sealing, immune to stunning, immune to attack lowering, just immune to everything. And I personally would say that Captain Ginyu is where I would consider using items. It's just going to depend on your team and what you're rolling with at the time. I mean, obviously, if you're super happy with what you got, then there's no real problem. You shouldn't really have an issue. But I think for me personally, I found that there were quite a few, how can I say, like, issues with this team build. But hey, you know what I mean? We'll just have to see what happens. Anyway, obviously I went with a movie bosses, uncontrollable power, kind of hybrid team. Probably one of my favorite extreme teams right now, just largely because of the Broly. You've got like the Broly collection that you can run, which I think is a lot of fun. You also now have tons of Janembas that you can run, which I think is really great. A lot of players probably are super into that. So I do understand, as well, that definitely, is a part of people's mindsets towards these things. In terms of this event, look, I decided that movie bosses would definitely be okay. The event itself has quite a few phases, but each phase is not super duper tanky or anything like that. I think Frieza is the Frieza final form has 130 million health, which sounds like a lot, but if you think about it, it's not really. So yeah, I think that's something, yeah, definitely that people need to obviously deal with. So yeah, I think this event is relatively long. I find that a lot of the newer red zones have actually been quite long. They've been quite challenging, they've been quite long. I think they aren't super duper easy from that aspect. They kind of pushing players to have teams get up for longer bits of content, for longer challenges, for different types of team builds. And I think, yeah, that's definitely something that can be quite challenging. Aside from that, though, what I will say is, the final strength level of Frieza is not too bad. A lot of the times, you'll find that your high level teams, generally speaking, can deal with these phases a lot. The hardest phase actually for me, I find, is the second from last stage, which deals with obviously Frieza final form, who can disable evasion and lock character switching, which is something that can cause problems for a lot of teams. A lot of teams have quite a few characters that are heavily reliant on evasion to be their form of mitigation, and in these situations where you have almost all of these units functioning to some degree with a requirement to use evasion to do things like this, I think it can cause you some issues. So you have to be careful of that. If you're bringing in evasion heavy team, there's not a lot currently of disable evasion nullification units. Like, there's only really Tech, MUI, Goku, so you do have to keep that in mind. You don't want to be in a situation where you're relying so heavily on evasion and things like that, that you struggle, that you really struggle. So I think keep that in mind. But other than that, yeah, this team ran well. Uncontrollable power, movie bosses, really cool hybrid team, some really strong selections here like Janemba, Buhan, all of which I think are characters that tend to be relatively helpful. Strong characters still, strong link sets. I will say, weirdly, Buhan's damage is kind of falling off a little bit, which sounds so weird to say for a character that can do 20 million attack stats with relative ease. But it's more the pacing and the lack of built-in crits and things like that that can give him some issues. So aside from that, though, I will say, for the most part, a lot of the times this event was fairly straightforward once you kind of got the team going, because you have quite a few phases. You can kind of build your team up, build your guys up, and get them going fairly easily. And I think this enables you to do the no item runs and just the events in general, not easily, but with more conviction than maybe an event where you start off against really hard enemies, but then you don't have necessarily the right kind of basis in terms of like tempo to complete the event. So I do think that's a challenge, of course. But yeah, other than that, I would say that's pretty much it. So yeah, really interesting no item run. Obviously, let me know what you guys think. Have you beaten the no item? What do you think in the new stages? But yeah, that's pretty much it from me. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.